Examples of Patience by TableTalk Magazine draws us into the quiet strength of those who endured suffering with steady hearts, rooted in the promises of God and the sure return of Christ, as seen in James chapter 5, verses 10 through 11. Like a lamp burning low but unwavering through the night, the lives of the prophets and of Job remind us that patient faith is never wasted, and that the Lord's compassion and mercy will have the final word. Now for our reading. My brethren, take the prophets, who spoke in the name of the Lord, as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job, and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. James chapter 5, verses 10 through 11. The certainty and nearness of the return of Jesus should motivate us to patiently endure our trials and tribulations. Of course, this does not mean that God forbids all attempts to alleviate suffering or to escape tribulation. Other passages of Scripture tell us to improve our lot if we are able to do so. The point, rather, is that we should take our eyes off personal vengeance and not allow our difficulties to make us grumble against others. Knowing that Christ will soon set all things right can help us fulfill those directives. Continuing his exhortations to patience, James in today's passage directs us to Old Testament examples of individuals who suffered patiently and experienced blessing. First, the apostle reminds us of the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. James does not tell us exactly whom he has in mind, but we can think of someone such as Jeremiah, who was imprisoned in the king's palace, cast into a cistern, and eventually dragged off to Egypt because he continued to proclaim the oracles of judgment against Judah that God gave him. James may also be thinking of Isaiah, who was sawn in two according to a Jewish tradition, apparently endorsed in Hebrews 11:37. It might be hard for us to consider the sufferings of these prophets and others and regard those men as blessed, but we should remember Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 5, verses 11 and 12, that those who are reviled and persecuted for Christ's sake are blessed because they are experiencing the same things as the prophets and will receive a great reward. James almost certainly had these words of Jesus in mind when he wrote today's passage. James also gives us Job as an example of the patient saint whose steadfastness is rewarded. Job might seem an odd choice to illustrate patience, for the book that bears his name records his frequent complaints to God about his suffering. Importantly, however, Job never abandoned his faith during his ordeal, and in fact we see that by the end of his story, his faith is more perfected than at the start, for he comes to confess the power and goodness of our inscrutable Creator. The endurance that Job acquired is itself a blessing, but we also note that he received twice as much as he had before his trial because of his patient endurance. God promises a great blessing to those who wait on him, trusting that he will set all things right. Such waiting is hard, but the Spirit will enable us to be patient as we think on the Lord's righteous character and his sure promise to reward all those who patiently endure suffering, looking to him as their ultimate rescuer. This concludes our reading. Thank you for listening.